I think I didn't do anything wrong, just a little innocent curiosity and some laughs with friends. But now there's a letter on my kitchen table from my husband's lawyer, and everyone's staring at me like I'm the villain. I never thought something so small would end up with me being sued. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. Let me start from the beginning, because honestly, I still can't believe how blown out of proportion this whole thing has gotten. It was supposed to be a fun Friday evening. Elliot and I had invited his parents, Graham and Fiona, over for dinner, along with my best friend Carla and Elliot's cousin Sean, with his wife Leah. Our 9-year-old daughter Nora was upstairs doing homework, and the adults were relaxing in our suburban living room with wine and conversation. The evening started pleasantly enough. Graham was telling stories about his latest fishing trip, and Fiona was showing us photos from her garden club. But as the wine flowed, I found myself getting a bit bored with the mundane chatter. Elliot, as usual, was being his quiet, reserved self, barely contributing to the conversation, except for the occasional polite nod or brief comment. "You know what we should play?" I announced, setting down my wine glass with perhaps a bit too much enthusiasm. "A game. Something fun to liven things up." Carla perked up immediately. She's always been my partner in crime when it comes to stirring up excitement. "What kind of game?" she asked with that mischievous grin I knew so well. "Truth or dare. Never have I ever. Something with a bit of spice." I laughed, already feeling the buzz from the wine. I noticed Elliot shift uncomfortably in his chair. "Morwenna, maybe we should just—" "Oh, come on, Elliot," I interrupted, rolling my eyes. "Don't be such a stick in the mud. We're all adults here." That's when the idea hit me. I'd been reading this article online about how couples in long-term relationships often lose their spark because they stop being curious about each other. And honestly, Elliot and I had been feeling pretty stale lately. He was always buried in work, never really paying attention to me anymore. "Actually," I said, feeling clever, "I have an even better idea. What if we played a little comparison game? You know, just for fun." The room went quiet for a moment. Sean raised an eyebrow, looking intrigued. "What kind of comparison?" I giggled, feeling like I was being delightfully scandalous. "Well, you know how they say curiosity killed the cat. I've always wondered about family genetics. Like, which of the Haldane men has the most impressive attributes?" Fiona's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Graham cleared his throat loudly. But Sean, charming, confident Sean, just laughed. "Morwenna," Leah gasped, her cheeks turning red. "What? It's just a silly question," I defended, waving my hand dismissively. "I mean, we're all family here, practically, and everyone's always curious about these things, right? It's totally natural." Elliot's face had gone pale. "This isn't appropriate," he said quietly, his voice tight. "Oh, lighten up, Elliot," I said, feeling a familiar frustration with his uptight attitude. "It's just a joke. You're being way too sensitive." Carla, bless her heart, jumped to my defense. "Come on, it's just girl talk. We're not actually asking anyone to prove anything." But I was on a roll now, feeling like the center of attention in a way I hadn't in months. I mean, theoretically, if we were to rank the Haldane men— I glanced between Elliot, Graham, and Sean with exaggerated thoughtfulness. "That's enough," Elliot said, standing up abruptly. His chair scraped against the hardwood floor with an unpleasant screech. "I'm not doing this." Everyone stared as he walked out of the room. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of his office door closing with a definitive click. "Well," I said, trying to laugh off the awkward tension, "I guess we know who's winning the most uptight category." Sean chuckled, but I noticed his eyes lingering on me with new interest. "Don't worry about him, Morwenna. Some people just can't handle a little fun." Fiona set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. "I think perhaps we should call it tonight," she said, her voice cooler than I'd ever heard it. "Oh, come on, Fiona," I protested. "I was just being playful. Elliot knows I didn't mean anything by it." But the damage was done. Graham was already helping Fiona with her coat, muttering something about an early morning. Leah looked mortified, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Only Carla and Sean seemed unfazed by the whole thing. After everyone left, I found Elliot in his office, hunched over his laptop. The blue glow from the screen illuminated his tense expression. "Hey," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Are you seriously upset about that silly joke?" He looked up at me, and I was surprised by the hurt in his eyes. "Silly joke? Morwenna, you just humiliated me in front of my family." "I did not. I was just being fun and spontaneous. You know, the things you used to like about me." I crossed my arms, feeling defensive. "It's not my fault you can't take a joke anymore." Elliot stared at me for a long moment, then turned back to his laptop. "Just leave me alone, okay?" I started to argue, but something in his tone stopped me. Instead, I huffed and went to bed, convinced that he'd get over it by morning, like he always did. But when I woke up, Elliot was already gone. His coffee cup sat in the sink, and there was no note. Unusual for him, since he always left me little messages about his day. I tried to push away the nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, I had pushed things too far this time. By the next week, I'd almost forgotten about the whole incident. Elliot had been polite but distant, which wasn't entirely unusual. He went through phases where work stressed him out, and he became withdrawn. I figured he just needed time to get over his bruised ego. I was meeting Carla and Leah for our usual Tuesday coffee at the local cafe, a cozy little place called the Daily Grind that served as the unofficial gossip hub of our neighborhood. The three of us had been meeting here every week for 2 years, ever since Leah and Sean moved to town. "So," Carla said, sliding into our usual corner booth with a wicked grin, "are we going to talk about Friday night or what?" Leah shifted uncomfortably in her seat, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug like it was a shield. "I really don't think we should—" "Oh, come on," I interrupted, settling in beside Carla. "It was harmless. Elliot's just being dramatic about the whole thing." "Harmless?" Leah's voice pitched higher. "Morwenna, you basically asked us to rate our husbands' private parts in front of the whole family." I waved my hand dismissively. "I didn't ask anyone to actually do anything. It was just a hypothetical question." "A silly game," Carla leaned forward conspiratorially. "But seriously, though, have you ever wondered? I mean, they're cousins, so there might be some family resemblance." "Carla!" Leah looked scandalized. "What? We're all thinking it now." Carla laughed. "Morwenna opened Pandora's box, and now I'm genuinely curious." I felt a little thrill at being the one who'd started something so deliciously scandalous. "Right? I mean, it's totally natural to wonder about these things. Everyone does it." "Not everyone announces it at family dinner," Leah muttered. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced down and saw it was from Elliot's sister, Sarah. "What the hell is wrong with you? Mum called me crying because you humiliated Elliot in front of everyone. This needs to stop." I showed the message to Carla, rolling my eyes. "See? Everyone's being so dramatic. It was one little comment." "Maybe you should apologize," Leah suggested quietly. I know Sean was embarrassed too. "Apologize for what? Having a sense of humor?" I scoffed. "Honestly, the Haldane family needs to learn to lighten up. They're all so uptight and proper all the time." Carla nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. Life's too short to walk around with sticks up your asses all the time." "I mean," I continued, warming to the topic, "it's not like I was asking anything that unreasonable. Couples talk about this stuff all the time, and between you and me, Elliot's always been a bit insecure about certain things. Maybe that's why he overreacted." Leah's face went pale. "Morwenna, you can't just—" "What? Share with my friends? We tell each other everything." I felt a surge of irritation at her prudish attitude. Besides, it's not like I'm posting it on Facebook or anything. But even as I said it, an idea began forming in my mind. What if I could find out? What if there was a way to satisfy this curiosity that had been planted in my head? "You know what?" I said, leaning forward with renewed enthusiasm. "I bet I could figure it out, like, scientifically." Carla's eyes lit up. "How?" "Well, I could observe, make mental notes. Compare data. I giggled at my own cleverness. Like a research project. This is insane, Leah said, standing up abruptly. I can't listen to this anymore. Morwenna, you're talking about your husband and my husband like they're specimens in a lab. Oh, don't be so dramatic, I called after her as she grabbed her purse. It's just girl talk. But Leah was already walking away, her heels clicking angrily against the cafe's tile floor. Carla watched her go with amusement. She's so uptight, probably worried about what you might discover about Sean. Right, I agreed. I mean, if you're confident in your man, what's there to worry about? We spent another hour dissecting the situation, with Carla encouraging my increasingly elaborate plans for research. By the time we parted ways, I felt vindicated and excited about my little project. That evening, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I realized it was Sean. Hey, got your number from the family group chat. Wanted to check if you're okay after all the drama. Let's talk later. I know something you'd like to hear. I stared at the message, feeling a flutter of excitement mixed with something I couldn't quite identify. Before I could respond, I heard Elliot's footsteps on the stairs. I quickly closed the message and set my phone on the nightstand, but not before I noticed that my tablet was open on the bed beside me, displaying our family group chat. In my excitement about Sean's text, I'd forgotten to close it. Elliot walked into the bedroom, and I saw his eyes flick to the tablet screen. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted almost imperceptibly. How was coffee with the girls? He asked, his tone carefully neutral. Fine, I said, perhaps a bit too quickly. Just the usual gossip. He nodded and headed to the bathroom. I heard the water running, and when he came back out, I was pretending to read a book, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw him quietly pick up his phone and take a picture of something. When I looked over, the tablet was still open to the group chat, and I realized with a sinking feeling that our entire conversation about Friday night was visible on the screen. But Elliot didn't say anything. He just got into bed, turned off his lamp, and lay with his back to me. I stared at the ceiling for a long time that night, wondering why I suddenly felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff I hadn't noticed before. Sean's text message haunted my thoughts for the next few days. Every time I looked at it, I felt that same flutter of excitement mixed with something darker. Anticipation, maybe, or the thrill of potential danger. Elliot had been even more distant since our coffee shop conversation. He left for work earlier, came home later, and when he was home, he spent most of his time in his office or playing with Nora. It was like I'd become invisible in my own house. By Thursday, I couldn't stand it anymore. I texted Sean back, "What did you want to talk about?" His response came within minutes. "Not over text. Can you meet me tomorrow? Leah's working late." I knew I shouldn't. Even in my frustrated state, some part of me recognized that meeting my husband's cousin alone, especially after the tension of the past week, was crossing a line. But Elliot's cold shoulder treatment was wearing on me, and I felt justified in seeking out someone who actually wanted to talk to me. "Where?" I typed back. "My place. 3 p.m.? I stared at the message for a long time before finally typing, "Okay." The next afternoon, I found myself standing on Sean and Leah's front porch, my heart pounding with nervous energy. Their house was similar to ours, suburban, well-maintained, the kind of place that screamed respectable family life. But as Sean opened the door with that charming smile of his, it felt like I was entering entirely different territory. "Morwenna," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "Well, you said you had something I'd want to hear," I replied, trying to sound casual despite the butterflies in my stomach. He led me to the living room, and I couldn't help but notice how different it felt from my own house, where Elliot and I had family photos and Nora's artwork covering every surface. Sean and Leah's place felt more like a showroom, perfectly coordinated but somehow cold. "Can I get you something to drink?" he asked. "Wine? Coffee?" "Wine sounds good," I said, settling onto their cream-colored sofa. He returned with 2 glasses of red wine and sat beside me, Closer than strictly necessary, I noticed. So, I said, taking a sip of wine to calm my nerves. What's this mysterious thing you wanted to tell me? Sean's eyes sparkled with mischief. Well, first, I wanted to say that I thought your little game the other night was hilarious. Everyone else was being so uptight about it. I felt a surge of validation. Thank you. Finally, someone with a sense of humor. Elliot's always been too serious, Sean continued, moving slightly closer. Even when we were kids, never could take a joke. Tell me about it, I said, rolling my eyes. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a robot. Everything has to be so proper and controlled all the time. That must be frustrating, Sean said, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. A woman like you, vibrant, spontaneous, full of life, stuck with someone so repressed. The wine was making me feel warm and bold. You have no idea. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd met someone different first, someone who appreciated my sense of adventure. Sean's hand moved to rest on the sofa behind me, not quite touching but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. About that game of yours, he said. The comparison thing? Yeah? I felt my cheeks flush. Well, let's just say that if you ever wanted to satisfy that curiosity, I wouldn't be opposed to helping with your research. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with implication. I knew I should laugh it off, make a joke, change the subject. Instead, I found myself leaning closer. Is that so? I heard myself say. What happened next felt like it was happening to someone else, like I was watching a movie of my own life as Sean's hand moved to cup my face, as he leaned in to kiss me, as I kissed him back instead of pulling away. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong even as it was happening, but it also felt exciting and dangerous and alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. When we finally broke apart, I was breathing hard and my heart was racing. Morwenna, Sean said, his voice husky, I've been thinking about you since that night, about what you said. We shouldn't, I whispered, but even as I said it, I wasn't pulling away. Why not? He asked. When was the last time Elliot made you feel desired? When was the last time he really saw you? The questions hit too close to home. When was the last time Elliot had looked at me the way Sean was looking at me right now? When had we last had a real conversation that wasn't about schedules or household logistics? He doesn't appreciate you, Sean continued, doesn't see how incredible you are. And in that moment, feeling desired and appreciated and seen, I made a choice that would change everything. 2 weeks later, we were at Graham and Fiona's house for their annual summer barbecue. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and the whole extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and their kids running around the backyard. I should have been enjoying myself, but I felt on edge. Sean and I had been texting constantly since that first afternoon, meeting whenever we could manage it. The thrill of the secret was intoxicating, but it was also making me paranoid. Every time Elliot looked at me, I wondered if he suspected something. Every time Leah made conversation, I felt guilty, but then Sean would catch my eye across the yard and smile, and all those worries would fade away. Morwenna, dear, could you help me with the salad? Fiona called from the kitchen. I followed her inside, grateful for something to do with my hands. But as I started chopping vegetables, I noticed that Fiona kept glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Is everything all right with you and Elliot? She asked finally. My knife paused mid-chop. Of course. Why would you ask that? You just seem distant lately. At dinner last week and today, you barely spoke to each other. I forced a laugh. We're fine, Fiona. Just busy with work and Nora and everything. You know how it is. But Fiona wasn't buying it. Morwenna, I've known my son for 34 years. He's been different lately. Quieter, more withdrawn. And you... She paused, choosing her words carefully. You seem like your mind is elsewhere. Before I could respond, Sean appeared in the kitchen doorway. Ladies, need any help in here? I felt my cheeks flush, and I saw Fiona's eyes narrow as she looked between us. We're fine, thank you, Fiona said coolly. But Sean didn't leave. Instead, he moved closer to where I was working, close enough that his arm brushed against mine as he reached for a beer from the refrigerator. "Great party, Aunt Fiona," he said. "Morwenna and I were just saying how nice it is when the whole family gets together like this." I felt trapped between them, Fiona watching me with growing suspicion, and Sean standing so close I could smell his cologne. "Yes," I managed to say. "Very nice." When Sean finally left, Fiona turned to me with a look that made my stomach drop. "Morwenna," she said quietly, "I hope you know what you're doing." That night, after we got home and put Nora to bed, I found a note on my pillow. "We need to talk. Don't delete anything." My phone immediately buzzed with a text from Elliot. "I know." I stared at the messages, my hands shaking. The wine from dinner suddenly felt like acid in my stomach. From downstairs, I could hear Elliot moving around in his office, the sound of papers shuffling and drawers opening and closing. For the first time since this whole thing started, I realized that I might have made a terrible mistake. The confrontation I'd been dreading never came. Instead, Elliot became even more distant, which somehow felt worse than if he'd just yelled at me. He was polite, civil even, but there was a coldness in his eyes that I'd never seen before. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was imagining things. Maybe he didn't actually know anything concrete. Maybe I could still fix this somehow. But then Nora's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, called and asked for a parent conference. "Is everything all right at home?" she asked when Elliot and I sat across from her in the small classroom after school hours. "Nora's been very withdrawn lately. Her grades are slipping, and she seems anxious during class." I felt Elliot's eyes on me, but when I looked at him, his expression was unreadable. "We've been having some stress at home," he said carefully. "Work pressures, family issues. Nothing that affects Nora directly." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded sympathetically. "Children are very sensitive to tension, even when adults think they're hiding it well. Has there been any major changes in routine? Arguments? Anything that might be affecting her sense of security?" The weight of guilt settled on my chest like a stone. I thought about all the times I'd been distracted lately, all the secret phone calls and text messages, all the evenings I'd spent thinking about Sean instead of focusing on my daughter. "We'll work on it," I said quietly. But instead of working on it, I found myself doubling down on my justifications. That evening, when Carla called to check in, I unloaded all my frustrations. "He's being so cold and distant," I complained, pacing around my kitchen while Elliot helped Nora with homework in the living room. "Like, if he's so unhappy with our marriage, maybe he should try actually participating in it instead of just sulking." "What do you mean?" Carla asked. "I mean, when was the last time he initiated anything romantic? When did he last plan a date night, or even just ask about my day like he actually cared about the answer?" I was working myself up now, feeling more and more justified in my choices. "A woman has needs, Carla, emotional needs. If he can't meet them, then maybe he shouldn't be surprised when someone else does." "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Carla's voice dropped to a whisper. I glanced toward the living room, where I could hear Elliot patiently explaining a math problem to Nora. "Let's just say that some members of the Haldane family are more attentive than others." Carla gasped. "Morwenna, you didn't." "I'm not admitting anything," I said quickly. "But hypothetically speaking, if a woman felt completely neglected by her husband, and if his charming cousin happened to make her feel appreciated and desired, well, these things happen." "Oh my God," Carla breathed. "How long has this been going on?" "There's nothing going on," I said, but even I could hear how unconvincing I sounded. "It's just nice to feel wanted for once." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with me painting myself as the victim of Elliot's emotional neglect and Sean as my knight in shining armor. By the time I hung up, I'd almost convinced myself that I was completely justified in everything I'd done. But my sense of righteousness was short-lived. The next day, I got a call from my friend Jessica, whose kids went to school with Nora. "Morwenna," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "I heard something at school pickup today that I thought you should know about." My stomach dropped. "What kind of something?" "Well, apparently Carla was talking to some of the other moms about relationship issues, and your name came up." I closed my eyes, feeling the world tilt around me. What exactly did she say? Something about the Haldane men and comparisons and affairs. Jessica paused. Morwenna, please tell me this isn't what it sounds like. But I couldn't, because it was exactly what it sounded like. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts from people I hadn't heard from in months. Some were concerned friends asking if I was okay. Others were clearly just fishing for gossip. A few were family members expressing their disappointment and shock. The worst was a text from Leah. How could you do this to me? To Nora? I trusted you. That evening, Fiona called and asked to speak with Elliot. I handed him the phone and watched his face grow increasingly grim as he listened to whatever she was telling him. When he hung up, he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something colder and more final. The whole family knows, he said quietly. About you and Sean. About what you've been saying about me, about our marriage, about our private life. I felt like I was drowning. Elliot, I can explain. Can you? He interrupted. Can you explain why you've been telling people that I'm inadequate, that I don't satisfy you, that you've been conducting some kind of sick comparison study involving my family members? It wasn't like that, I protested, but the words sounded hollow even to me. Then what was it like, Morwenna? His voice was getting louder now, and I could hear the pain underneath the anger. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been humiliating me publicly while having an affair with my cousin. So please explain to me how I'm misunderstanding the situation. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because the truth was, I couldn't explain it in a way that didn't make me look like exactly what I was. A woman who had betrayed her husband and family for the sake of excitement and validation. I've consulted a lawyer, Elliot said finally. Everyone's going to get the full story soon, the real story, with evidence and documentation. I laughed, but it came out shaky and desperate. Evidence? Elliot, you're being dramatic. It's not like I committed a crime. But even as I said it, I felt a chill run down my spine. Because the look in Elliot's eyes told me that he wasn't bluffing. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I began to realize that I might be in serious trouble. The law office smelled like leather and disappointment. I sat across from my hastily hired attorney, Margaret Chen, watching her flip through a thick folder of documents that Elliot's legal team had provided as part of the discovery process. Mrs. Haldane, Margaret said, looking up at me with barely concealed exasperation, I have to ask, did you really think none of this would come back to you? Spread across her desk were printouts of text messages, bank statements, photographs, and what appeared to be a detailed timeline of events. I recognized my own words staring back at me from various screenshots, and my stomach lurched. I don't understand, I said, though that wasn't entirely true. What does any of this have to do with divorce proceedings? Margaret picked up one of the documents. Well, let's start with the defamation claim. Your husband's attorney has documented instances where you publicly disparaged his character, shared intimate details about your marriage without consent, and made what could be construed as libelous statements about his personal attributes. She handed me a stack of screenshots. I saw messages from the group chat with Carla and Leah, posts from social media that I'd forgotten I'd made, and even what appeared to be a recording from Nora's parent-teacher conference. How did they get all this? I whispered. Text messages are discoverable in legal proceedings. Social media posts are public record, and apparently, several people were concerned enough about the situation to document things themselves. Margaret's tone was professional but cold. Mrs. Haldane, did you really discuss your husband's intimate details with other parents at your daughter's school? I remembered that day vividly now. I'd been feeling particularly vindicated after an afternoon with Sean, and when another mom had made a comment about how quiet and reserved Elliot seemed, I'd let slip some comments about his performance issues and how I was getting my needs met. Elsewhere, it was just girl talk, I said weakly. Girl talk that was overheard by at least 6 other parents and 1 teacher, Margaret replied. There's also the matter of the affair itself. She pulled out another set of documents, bank statements showing charges to hotels, restaurants, and even a weekend getaway that Sean and I had taken when I told Elliot I was visiting my sister. Your husband's attorney has compiled a very thorough timeline of your relationship with Mr. Vickers. Credit card receipts, GPS data from your phone, witness statements. She paused. Mrs. Haldane, did you know your husband had a dashboard camera in his car? My blood ran cold. What? Apparently he installed it several months ago for insurance purposes, but it captured some very interesting footage of you leaving Mr. Vickers' residence at various times when you were supposed to be elsewhere. She showed me still frames from the video, me walking out of Sean's house, looking around nervously before getting into my car, me kissing Sean goodbye on his front porch, me arriving at the hotel where we'd spent our weekend together. This is stalking, I said desperately. He was spying on me. He was documenting suspected adultery for legal purposes, Margaret corrected, which, given the evidence, appears to have been justified. I felt the walls closing in around me. What does this mean? What's he asking for? Margaret consulted another document. Full custody of your daughter, with supervised visitation for you until you complete counselling. Division of assets heavily in his favour due to marital misconduct, and he wants you to pay his legal fees. He can't do that, I protested. Nora needs her mother. Mrs. Haldane, your daughter's teacher has documented behavioural changes consistent with a child experiencing trauma from family instability. Your husband has character witnesses testifying to his fitness as a parent, while you have... She gestured at the pile of evidence. This. I stared at the documents, feeling like I was looking at someone else's life. How had things gotten so out of control? There's also the matter of Mr. Vickers, Margaret continued. His wife has filed for divorce as well, and she's naming you as co-respondent. She's also considering a civil suit for alienation of affection. Alienation of what? It's a tort claim. Essentially, she's arguing that you deliberately interfered with her marriage and caused the breakdown of her relationship with her husband. I thought about Leah, sweet, trusting Leah, who had welcomed me into the family, who had confided in me, about her struggles with infertility, who had considered me a friend. Can she do that? In this state, yes, and given the evidence. Margaret gestured at the papers again. She has a strong case. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced down and saw it was from Sean. Lawyers are telling me to cut all contact. Sorry, this got too complicated. Just like that, the man I'd risked everything for was abandoning me. Mrs. I hadn't just lost Ruby. I'd lost the right to call myself the kind of mother she deserved. 6 months later, I sat in the same courthouse, but everything was different. Your best option might be to accept a settlement and try to minimize the damage. But I'm the victim here, I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. Elliot was emotionally distant. He neglected me. He drove me to this. Margaret looked at me with something that might have been pity. Mrs. Haldane, I understand that marriages are complicated, but legally speaking, emotional distance is not grounds for defamation, adultery, or public humiliation. Your husband may not have been the perfect spouse, but he didn't break any laws. You, on the other hand. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The evidence spoke for itself. That evening, I sat in my empty house. Elliot had moved out and taken Nora with him, temporarily, staring at the legal documents scattered across my kitchen table. My phone had been quiet all day. Carla wasn't returning my calls. My mother had left a voicemail saying she was disappointed and needed time to process. Even my sister had been cold when I'd tried to explain my side of the story. I picked up one of the screenshots of my own text messages, reading words I'd written just weeks ago. If Elliot was half the man his cousin is, maybe I wouldn't have to look elsewhere for satisfaction. The woman who had written those words felt like a stranger to me now. She seemed so confident, so justified in her choices. She had no idea that every word was being documented, that every decision was leading her toward this moment of complete isolation. My phone buzzed one more time. It was a text from my lawyer. Court date set for next month. We need to discuss your response strategy ASAP. I stared at the message until the words blurred together, finally understanding that this wasn't just going to go away. This wasn't something I could laugh off or explain away or blame on someone else. This was Judgment Day, and I was going to have to face the consequences of every choice I'd made. The courthouse felt like a monument to my own destruction. Every echo on the marble floors reminded me how far I'd fallen. Across the aisle, Elliot sat with his lawyer, calm, composed, and completely finished with me. When our eyes met, there was no anger left, just quiet disappointment. His attorney presented everything: hotel receipts, messages, recordings, witness statements, even a conversation I'd forgotten about, where my own voice mocked Elliot's limitations. The silence that followed was unbearable. By the time Judge Williams delivered her ruling, I already knew the outcome. Elliot got primary custody of Nora, the house, most of our assets. I was ordered to pay legal fees and attend counseling before seeing my daughter unsupervised. When it ended, Elliot paused beside me. "I hope you find whatever it was you were looking for," he said, "but I hope it was worth what it cost our daughter." 3 months later, I sit in a small apartment across town, writing this for court-ordered counseling. Nora visits every other weekend, but she barely talks. Elliot is polite but distant. Sean never called again. I still tell myself I wasn't a bad person, just lonely, neglected, desperate to feel wanted. But that doesn't matter anymore. My reasons don't undo the harm. Elliot was right. Whatever I was searching for, it wasn't worth the price. Because in the end, I didn't just lose my marriage. I lost the right to pretend I was the victim. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching, are watching, are watching, are watching, are watching, are watching, are watching.